One.
Welcome, everybody. How many of you guys have been a real estate tour today? Going to now, this is your fourth show here. Show of hands here. All right, a bunch of people all over New York City. My name is Mike. I'm the editor of Relix magazine, and I'm lucky and proud to have seen these guys now for going on 12 years, which is crazy to think about. And you know, the journey to find the end up here was kind of funny. You know, we looked at different venues and everything, and you know, at the end of the day, this is actually the perfect place to talk about their new album because. For myself, and I think a lot of other people here, you know, we first started seeing you guys right here on Kent Avenue back in the day, and the venues that kind of surrounded that place. And you know, your new album, the main thing, in many ways is a new beginning sonically. There's a lot of new textures, there's a lot of new stories on there, but it's also a homecoming with your producer, your studio, and a lot of the vibes that were into that. So I guess, you know, my first question here is, you know, kind of what led you guys back to New Paltz to start working at LP5 here?
I had gotten back in touch with Kevin, the guy that produced this record, who also produced our second album, Days. We had spoken a little bit, you know, we've seen each other over the years and stuff, but I was recording some songs for a separate project, and we kind of just reconnected and just had a lot of good conversations that were kind of surrounding the kind of general thoughts that kind of went into the making of this record and the themes on this record, and we were just connected in a way that felt really productive. So I brought the idea up to the rest of the guys that maybe we could work with him again, kind of expecting that maybe it might not go over well, just because we've always kind of switched it up from record to record in terms of studios and producers and stuff. I think just for it to continue to be fun, or for it to, you know, just for a new experience, but everyone seemed pretty on board right away. And yeah, I think the initial thought was like, we'll go in for a week and record a few songs, and maybe we'll bounce around and go to different studios. But it really, after the first day of recording with him, we were all, we had a conversation after the first session. We were just like, that really went pretty well. I think we should do the whole record with him. So we did. And
it's kind of funny because, sorry to cut you off, Mike, but you know, what we were looking for on this record, like pretty unequivocally, was somebody who would push us into new territory. I mean, I think that was like a really important goal that the band had, you know, being that it was our fifth record, and you know, now it's been like 12 years since we've been a band, but at the time it had been 10, and hitting that decade mark and just feeling like, you know, I think it's important for us musically, and also for anybody who might listen to the record, to, you know, have something new and exciting rather than just repeating ourselves. So it's kind of this funny thing that we wound up going back to somebody who made like maybe our most beloved record in order to achieve that. Mm-hmm. But you know, I think that it was a reason that was able to happen with him in a way that it might not have been able to happen with anyone else, and that's because he really was like totally invested in the band and in the project on a personal level. Like it took us, you know, not that we were going to the studio every day, but it took us like the better part of a year to finish making this record, and he was like not somebody who was just like, well, we have these 12 scheduled days of recording time, and then we'll mix it and we'll be done. It was just like, this is going to take however much. It was like he was a member of the band in that regard. Like, we're just going to take as much time as it needs to take to finish the record, and he was able to push us in ways that somebody you don't know as well maybe can't push you, you know? It's like your family members or something, or like, you know, like it might have been awkward if it was somebody we had just met, but since we hadn't just met him, he was able to really challenge us and our ideas and ask us hard questions and stuff, so it wound up being a good fit.
You guys had known Kevin, you know, the entire history of the band, correct? Or even before?
Yeah, we actually met him when I was like 18 years old in high school. I recorded with him in a band that I was in back then, with Patrick from Titus Andronicus and some other folks. But yeah, he was at that point working at the studio had the same name. It was called Mercado, but it was based in Harlem, and it was owned by the Walkmen, and it was their studio where they recorded their first record and I think a lot of their second record. And we were just big fans of the Walkmen, and we saw that they had advertised on their website that you could, you know, rent their studio out. So we pulled our money together and did that. I think half expecting that they would be like recording us, but it was
Got Kevin instead.
their friend Kevin was like the house engineer there, and so that's how we met him. But yes, we've been in touch.
But
Yeah.
you know, it's funny is we were like 18-year-old kids, and obviously this was like Martin's band with some other friends of ours. But it was like we rolled in this pack. Julian was a part of it too, of like northern New Jersey music scene, like basically two towns. But it was like that thing that you would do when you were 18, like, well, that's the coolest thing I've ever heard, that you're actually going to that studio. We're all going to hang out there, you know. And so there's like 30 kids, all illegally smoking pot and drinking beer
He didn't
in
know
this
how young
recording
we were,
studio.
too.
And he was like, this is very funny because this is like almost 20 years later now. And he later revealed to us that was the first actual, like, he was like pretending too, like that was the first professional session that they ever booked at that studio. And it was that, and also like the ground floor of this building was a police station. So like the whole time he was like, I'm gonna get arrested, like this is completely insane. And we didn't know that he was thinking any of that, you know, at the time he like told us. We had a lot of good laughs this time around, I think.
Not to bring up any Vampire Weekend real estate Twitter wars here, but I believe some of the Vampire Weekend guys were actually interning for that studio around the same
Really?
time.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
There's a lot of,
Yeah.
I guess,
That
you
makes
know,
sense.
if you're, I interned there actually in college as well. That's pretty funny. I think we should bring that up. We've been having some fake beef with those guys about who's the most real fake jam band.
I'm going to go with real estate here. You guys reunited with Kevin after a bunch of years since days, and obviously you guys have this long, deep, rich history here. And I know that for you guys personally, one of the goals here was to do something different sonically and lyrically, and I think you guys accomplished that. You know, I mean, how proactive was Kevin in pushing you guys, and what were some of his techniques? I mean, he's known you guys since you were 18 years old, and here you are with wives, and some of you guys with kids, and a whole different place in your life, yet here's this guy who kind of came of age with you in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely older than us, but in that way, I think, yeah, I mean, we've kind of grown together in a lot of ways. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, he kind of, I mean, in terms of like for me, like when I was like singing and kind of getting in there in the lyrics and trying to, you know, like pick my brain about like what the songs are about and what are you thinking about when you're singing this song. You gotta you're acting. You need to get into that mindset or whatever, which is actually not something that I ever really thought about before, but it's kind of probably pretty obvious. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, he also forces us to, me especially, like I have a tendency to want to rush and finish things and get it, and I really wanted to get this record done like well before we actually ended up finishing it, and I kept thinking, we'll get it done by the fall, we'll get it done before the end of this calendar year, and it just like kept not happening. But like he works really, really slowly, which is good. I mean, it's good. It forces you to stop and like really analyze what you're doing, and we would spend half of each day just kind of sitting and talking about what we're trying to do and what we're going to do today, and like we wouldn't even start making noise until like 6 or 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
It's like, oh well, actually we should probably break for dinner and then we'll get started.
But he did do this thing that I'm only now realize after we've been doing all this press and talking about the record. But he was doing this thing where he would ask us like very specifically like, why are you doing that? Do we have a reason for doing that? He would ask everyone, and it comes off as, and he doesn't have an incredible bedside manner, so it's kind of a vulnerable thing to like try a part in front of somebody, and he'd be like, why are you doing that? And then he clarified, he was like, I'm not making a judgment call on it or saying it's good or bad. Like if you have a reason, then I don't care what I think about it, then that's good. But if you don't have a reason, I want you to have a reason, or at least maybe consider some other things to do. And I think like now thinking about that, I was like, yeah, that's cool, and was wondering where he was coming from. And now I think like, I don't know if that makes sense for every band and every, like I'm definitely a subscriber to the Neil Young school of like, just plug it in and play and don't think about it. And that's going to be great. But I think when we were kind of very deliberate with him, being like, we don't want to do what we always do. Like if you made 4.5-ish records together before, you can have a tendency to just like, well, this is what we do, this is how we make records, this is the type of bass line that I play, and I think so like coming from that specific vantage point of like, consider what you're doing. If you really don't want to repeat yourself, like then make sure that you're not, or something like that.
Well, two techniques that from at least what I've heard from you guys talking about making this record that you guys accomplished by kind of changing up your creative process was, one, the entire band on this record really did contribute a little bit to the arrangements of the record in a different way than in the past, which I'm sure for you, Martin, was different. And two, you guys brought in some outside voices and outside musicians, which is a new thing. You guys have always done it, as a band. So, I mean, at what point did you guys decide to kind of open up the kind of creative valves in that way? And I guess for Martin, how is that for you to kind of let other people kind of take your songs and kind of rearrange them for its own?
I mean, that's been the way we've done it for a few, like, I think we did In Mind a little bit that way as well, like, and it's a song by song thing, but like I think it's a productive thing to do, and it's a good thing to do, but it's definitely weird for me. I tried to actually have less of an idea of where these songs were going to go this time around, because I knew that, like, I was going to bring it to the band and it was going to change and morph and stuff, and so, like, for the most part, I mean, it's like that's what this band is, and I think I think there's specific songs and maybe there were specific parts or things that were played where it took me a while to get used to them, and I think at first it could be frustrating. But yeah, I mean, and then in terms of like bringing in other musicians, that was kind of like all Kevin pushing us to do that, and he kept bringing it up, and I think he brought it up a few times. And the first few times, I mean, at least I was kind of dismissive of it, because I was like, that's not really what we do. We don't like, we're not going to bring in, your friend that can like play the bongos or something. It's like, I mean, we can play bongos, but yeah, I think he had a good point. It's just the idea of like bringing in a different brain and a different perspective, and just, yeah, I mean, it's just like the more the merrier in terms of like trying to collaborate on something and make something creative. I mean, that's how I feel now, at least.
Yeah, and sonically, you guys definitely touched on some things that I think it kind of evolved from In Mind and some of the stuff you guys were doing before that as well. But there's this kind of some new templates that, beginning of the album title, really kind of signal a new direction, which I believe is a Roxy Music quote or song title. You guys nodding to it?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it's a song on the record, and when I wrote that song, I just thought it sounded like a good thing to repeat in a chorus, but it's a Roxy Music song. But going into making this record, that was something that I was listening to a lot, and it's kind of like a goalpost in terms of, it's just a really good sounding record. It's just like, it would be nice to make an album that sounds that good, and it seems like the style of music that we play, like, I don't know, I think we were just, for me at least, it was just like if we could try and like keep that in our minds as like, there's a lot of kind of open space on that record and ambient sounds, and I mean, and it kind of did make its way. At this record, there is a lot of like, there's literally a lot of literal white noise, like on a lot of the songs on the record, like synthesizer, the white noise setting on the Arp Odyssey, and it sounds like steam valves or something, yeah, it's just nice. It just kind of adds almost like a chaotic element that I really like. That is something that we might not have thought to do in the past.
And also, I think the level of patience that comes from being a band for so long and experimenting with so many different styles over the years, which I think a younger band may be able to kind of place in their songs and let them breathe in that sense. So I think that really came through.
Yeah, I think a lot of this stuff wouldn't have happened if we didn't take a year to make this record. And if we were doing it in 2 weeks, it would have been a very different record for sure.
Well, speaking of new voices, Julian, I believe this album has the first song that you wrote for the band and definitely sang for the band. Can you talk a little bit about the genesis of that and how, was that the first song that you wrote with real estate in mind, so to speak? Or
it was, yeah. Yeah, so actually, I sent the guys 2 different demos that both of those I wrote, very differently than I normally write solo stuff, which, like, the arrangements for solo stuff, I don't ever sort of constrain to 2 guitars, keyboard, bass, drums. I kind of write whatever I want to write. At those songs, I kind of was sort of playing a restrictive game with myself, where it's like, here's the parts, here are the pieces that are going to be in the arrangement. Like, I want this to be performable live. So that was kind of an exciting way to approach writing, since I don't play with a band outside of real estate. So yeah, they were very, very nice to humor me
in accepting those demos, and one of them, we decided was worth pursuing.
He's being modest, we all used to play, well, Martin and I in particular, a couple other people in the room that I see too, all used to, in high school, as far back as high school and through college, used to play in lots of different bands together.
That's true, yeah.
And Julian was frequently the chief songwriter of those bands.
Yeah, that's totally true.
So we have a lot of experience playing songs that Julian has written.
For sure, that is true, yeah.
I mean, if I'm correct, Bleecker, I think the first tour you went on was actually with Julian's band, right?
The first tour that any of us ever went on that I booked was largely booked on MySpace. Was a band that we had called Les Majesty, and it was Julian was the chief songwriter of that band. Yeah, and yeah, totally. That's
The only songwriter.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, and we saved up a bunch of money or borrowed money or something and bought this old Chevy conversion van, and it broke down in the middle of Wyoming, and
it broke down in front of the Devil's Tower. You've seen Close Encounters of the Third Kind. That's where it broke down. Started smoking. We were stranded out there for a week in Gillette, Wyoming.
All those fun things that happen when you're 19 and decide to go on a rock tour. And actually, so I was 19 when we did that tour, and not a calendar year has gone by since then that I haven't done some kind of touring. I'm 33 now, so life on the road, man.
And I think that kind of that early bond. I was thinking about this a lot today while I saw you guys play outside all these amazing shuttered record stores. Some of that childhood bond, coming to see shows in New York City or buy records in New York City or play shows locally or kind of on this DIY path outside. There really has bonded at least the three of you guys and Matt as well here in your journey here, and especially as you guys approach this new album. As you said, it's your fifth album. You guys are in a very different place in life. You guys have had tons of life experience. I know that lyrically, when you spoke to us earlier this year, you said that you were trying to channel some of the questions you had about being a touring musician and being a father who makes music for a living versus works in finance or law or a doctor or whatnot. Talk a little bit more about kind of how that influenced your songwriting or decision to make another album.
Yeah, it's a weird thing when you start realize you've been doing something for so long, and it's a very unusual way to live your life. Being on the road a few months every year and on and off, and there's very little stability in it. So yeah, I don't know. It's something that I just was kind of questioning a lot going into this. Also, at the same time, knowing that I didn't really know what else I would do, and I kind of love doing this more than anything. So, but yeah, it's I wanted to do it, but yeah, it was. It's just something that I think I think as with everything else in the process of making this record, I was kind of putting a little more thought into it than in the past, where I probably would have just been time for another record, and let's go. It was more just how do I write songs that feel like they're worth putting this much of myself into, and spending this much time, because I'm gonna have to be gone a lot, so it may as well be worth it in some way or another. I'm not sure if that makes sense.
No, I think it definitely makes sense, and I think that one of the though being a touring musician is hard and it's a life not for everybody, there is something beautiful, and I'm sure all of you guys, both lyrically and musically, can experience this, is that you have a diary of your creative life and your personal life since you started writing music. Whether it's, I always think back to your first album, which was very much about that, wistful period, graduating from school and not knowing what you're going to do next, and getting married, and as I said, having kids, and these next steps, and it's something that everyone could have, and not everyone could share with their friends in the world.
Here we are 12 years later not knowing what we're going to do next.
That's true, though. I've thought about that, how each record does, for me, it really, it encapsulates in some, not in a global way for me, for my life, but yeah, it says a lot about where I was at each point in my life when I listened to those records.
I think also just to expand that, something that we were talking about in the studio, from a personal standpoint, definitely, sort of we touched on before, the hard question of, seriously, what why should we make another record? Not that we ever didn't want to, we always knew that we wanted to, but like, I don't think we really asked ourselves that question previously, and it's just like, okay, well, we have these four, what is a fifth real estate record going to bring to the world? And we kind of landed on like, well, it better be as good as we can possibly make it, and we really had this like leave it all on the field kind of attitude when we went into the studio. And I think that came from, you know, a lot of things that Martin's talking about, and also just that like feels like a sort of anxious, uncertain world at the moment, you know. And so like, what is worthwhile about making music, and through the process discovering what we did continue to feel like was worthwhile about it. And you know, I think it is worthwhile that if you're gonna pursue a sort of artistic pursuit of any kind, or any pursuit at all, I think it's more obvious now than ever that like you should care about it.
Absolutely. And, you know, I think I've read in an interview you guys have done so far that you really did feel like, you know, the last record was a kind of a little bit of a bridge record, and now you have kind of a new period. And I think, at least song title-wise, there's a very obvious going from Saturday to Friday, closing the last record, to the beginning of this record. You know, at what point in this process did you kind of feel like you guys were kind of lifting off into a kind of a new period for the band? It sounds like you guys had a lot wrestling in your minds, but, you know, did you listen back to some early demos and be like, you know what, we've never actually been this vulnerable this way, or you know, tried to use a song that has the Roxy music versus Yola Tango and whatnot?
Personally, I don't feel like it felt like that until we were done. I don't know. I feel like it happened really naturally. That, you know, but now having listened to the record's been done since since almost a year ago. So I've been listening to it a lot, and I don't know. I feel like I've discovered a lot about what we were doing, or what it means, since it's been finished. But yeah, I mean, I don't even, the last record in mine didn't feel like when we were making it. I mean, and I can see now that it feels transitional because it's Julian's first record, but like it didn't feel that way. It felt like we were making another record at the time too. But yeah, this one does feel like we are like this new unit. I mean, it's just a newly invested kind of feeling. Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. And you know, I think that you know, one of the blessings and curses of making a record over a 2-year period is you have a lot of material. I know a lot of it made it this record. I know there's a bunch of stuff you guys kind of played live. You're always great about kind of testing your songs out live before you record them. How much material did you guys write that didn't actually make this record that might either surface in the live set or surface somewhere else?
There's a lot of it. I think we have like 6 songs that are unfinished from these sessions, one of which was much beloved, this song called Half a Human that we played live a lot. That was actually like a pretty big jam vehicle for us. And I was really excited as a guy who comes from a sort of a varied musical background, but definitely a person who is excited to be being interviewed by Relix right now. And from that kind of corner of the musical world, that the band was getting pretty good at improvising this one passage from that song, and the fans were really digging it. And like, you know, a lot of fans on the internet seem to be like, "Where's Half a Human?" Which is like, that's also another sort of like dream fulfillment of mine, that like we would have this song that exists purely in the live space that fans actually know about and would be asking about. So I'm glad that people are paying attention in that way, if you're one of them in this room. And we'll put it on a record. We just didn't feel like the version we recorded was honestly as good as we were playing it live. So we're still working on it.
It's kind of like the Fish studio albums. Yeah, they're just not as good or whatever, right? Like,
yeah, that one's just like a live.
We can't capture that song yet. We have to figure it out.
That makes the bust-up potential that much better. Yeah. Well, I think we have time for 1 or 2 questions from the audience. I think the best way to do it, if anyone wants to raise their hands, I could, you guys come up front and I could get the question and ask. You want to come this way?
Someone over there.
Yeah. Oh, I guess we have some good acoustics here, so
yeah,
question?
we can hear you.
Yeah.
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 Oh man, I had like 8 questions right now. I gotta decide which one I want. I could go a million ways with this. I'll ask a question for Matt. I saw you guys at Brooklyn Steel a few times in 2017. I remember when you guys came out, Matt was kind of like throwing grapes into the audience. So I'll ask you, do you prefer green grapes or regular grapes? And if so, do you prefer seedless or with seeds?
I do love grapes. I have to be honest. I would have to go with they're just red grapes, correct? The not green ones.
Right.
Yeah.
I thought our policy was throwing only peelable fruit into the audience.
Well, when you reach a certain level of fame, when you go backstage, they have a lot of, accoutrements, fruit and cheese and stuff. And
Right.
we can't eat it all. So,
All right. I personally like
Lucky
the green,
fans.
the green seedless, but I mean.
oh yeah,
they're
sure,
all good.
totally.
They really are.
Cool.
Those are good.
Yeah. Hey, go
Is that a
go Kings, by the way.
suggestion for the next time you see us?
Sacramento Kings? Yeah. What do you guys prefer?
I'm a Warriors fan. But.
All right. Well, they had a good run.
Are we talking grapes or basketball?
Well, thanks for the question. Appreciate that.
We got some hard-hitting questions here. Over here?
Yeah, I got a question. Your design on your album, I mean, all album design are sick. I mean, I appreciated them. I was looking into it, and I was just wondering what the idea was behind this one.
This is a friend of ours named Bjorn Copeland, who, if you've ever heard of the band Black Dice, he's a member of that band. Kind of sounds like that. He is also a very accomplished visual artist, and we always knew that we sort of had this idea to ask him. He did a poster for us at one point. I think Martin kind of like rediscovered that poster and was like, hey, it'd be cool to have Bjorn work on an album cover. And he made that collage. Bjorn's stuff is very like kind of like the text that's on there that's made in his style. That's actually made by the guy who did the rest of the design. This guy Rob Carmichael, who has worked on I think almost all of our records, definitely the last 4.
Everything since the first one.
We had this kind of good line. So Bjorn's artwork can be kind of like disorienting, and the idea was to take our sort of classic real estate sort of layout and format, this sort of squared off framed photo with some sort of album logo at the top, and kind of, pardon my language, fuck it up. Like somebody said, take a real estate album and run it through Bjorn's pedal board is kind of the best way that I could see it. And I think it just sort of thematically fits with the record because it's like, it's real estate, we're still in there, but it's a bit more experimental. We're trying some new things, look a little harder. What is that image? Like it looks familiar to me, but I can't quite wrap my head around it kind of thing. Yeah.
I got a follow-up question to that. Speaking of kind of full circle, but not kind of landing exactly where you started. Today, you guys kind of bootlegged your own album and kind of tweaked the design of it to reflect your earliest recordings, really. So talk a little bit about, what you were going for with that whole model.
Earlier today, we played in front of 3 record stores that no longer exist. We were calling it this outstore thing. It was Rocks in Your Head, Other Music, and the original Kings, all downtown in Manhattan. And then, we just thought it'd be a nice way to tie it up with, hey, there are a bunch of great record stores that still do exist, so come here and play in a still, functioning great record store. But we kind of thought of it as like busking, because we were playing out on the street, and so we made these CDRs that we were giving away. And they did it like we made it in the format of this first CDR that we ever made on our very first tour, which was exactly 11 years ago or something. It was March.
It was March 2009.
We like jumped in a van.
It says it on the cover too,
went
like
to
tour
South by
CDR.
It was like before
March 2009,
Before our album came out, we just like burned whatever songs we had.
which were like
CDR.
ostensibly to sell, but we ended up just giving them all away.
Something like that.
Yeah.
But it was kind of a nice little Easter egg there.
Awesome. I think we have time for 2 more questions. Anyone over here?
I am from suburban town, New Jersey, Glen Rock, and I was just wondering.
We're from Ridgewood.
Yeah, I know.
They're neighboring towns.
Yeah.
We used to play shows in Glen Rock all the time.
Yeah. But I was just wondering, taking a somewhat seemingly mundane life of suburbia and turning it into music. I know you mentioned diaries before, but how do you kind of approach that to your songwriting? Is it like a mood thing? Is it like a story thing?
I mean, I think I just didn't know what else to write about on those early records, especially on. Yeah, I don't know. I think I was just writing about memories that I had, or maybe even idealized versions of memories of riding your bike around town or something. It just felt like a nice thing to write a song about. Yeah, I don't know if I put enough thought into it.
As Jersey kids, it would always kind of piss us off when there would be people who would be like, "We're from New York," there were other band. There's a band that was getting popular at the time who we are continue to be friends with, but they were like, we're from Brooklyn. And I was like, those girls aren't from Brooklyn, they're from New Jersey. So I think that we like really wanted to rep the fact that we were from New Jersey, and like so we've like totally embraced. You know, we were like living at our parents' house in New Jersey, so it just would have been like totally disingenuous to be like, yeah, we're in New York.
I think that they were living in Brooklyn.
They were
living
they
in
were.
our parents' basements.
This is no beef, but we were living. We just felt honest, you know, and apparently it resonated with some people at the time. So.
I grew up in Westchester, which I'm jealous of all you people in Jersey who have managed to find such success in the creative fields. But I think one of the beauties of living in the suburbs surrounding New York, especially at that time when you're first discovering music, is you kind of, just like when you're looking at New York skyline, you have the best view of it from slightly removed. And I think that you guys have always been able to kind of capture that in a way that feels universal, but also very specific. Like, even though I grew up in a town, an hour from you guys, a lot of the streets I'm sure are very similar, and I'm sure a lot of people have that experience, whether it was outside New York or Chicago or anywhere really, the Bay Area.
Thank you.
All right, one more question if anyone has. All right, right over here.
Hi, I actually was going to ask a similar question to like the guy in the cool glasses, but because I also grew up in northern New Jersey, I'm from Leonia, but I guess my plan B question was, how was it like working with Sylvan Esso? They're also like a favorite band of mine.
Amelia is a really good friend of the band's, and mine in particular. We went to college together, and so I had this idea for that part that ultimately she wound up singing, like, because the Paper Cup is kind of this disco thing, and I was like, oh, the chorus is really ripe for this kind of like call and response thing. And Martin was I wanted Martin to do it, and Martin was like in the studio. I wasn't even there. Martin was in the studio one night, like trying to record this falsetto version of this part, and I got a call from him and was like, I'm trying to do this thing, and don't you think we should just like get a woman to actually sing it, and do you think Amelia would do it? And it was kind of like an obvious. She actually, I have a solo record from a few years ago that she sings on, and she's been sort of a long-time friend and collaborator, so we asked her to try something, and she and Nick from Sylvan Esso recorded it together remotely in their home studio and then sent it to us, and it wound up being that little like syncopated call and response thing that happens in a sort of atypical rhythm is not what I was thinking of at all. It was like totally her own innovation, and we were all kind of like taken aback, like, whoa, this is like different and weird and really cool. And so it made it in that way, and so I think that just speaks to like her creativity and artistry, and it happened really fast.
But she sang on one of your solo records too, right?
That's what I was saying.
You've collaborated.
Totally, yeah.
You covered Mountain Man back before they were Mountain Man.
It's true. I actually feel a little bit bad about that. On my first solo record, I covered the Mountain Man song Animal Tracks, and it was like before they released their own version of it. But we didn't know what we were doing. Probably was a little, wouldn't have flown now, but it's always been like a familial vibe, and they're part of the Real Estate extended family for sure. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Let's hear some music here. Woo! And guys, we're going to play some songs right now, but they'll be back for a proper show in July at Central Park Summer Stage, which I believe is a first venue for you guys. So I think they hope to see everyone there.
I've heard that they're selling tickets for that show here, so if you want your tickets now,
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Mike.
Woo!
Let's do you. Let's start with you.
we just wrote the rest of the set list.
Feel free to yell stuff out. We can't promise we'll play it, but we will listen. Linger. I only did that once, but great song. All seem kind of weird with no drummer. Could be interesting.
All right.
This will all be taken under consideration later on in the set.
1, 2, 3.
We can play at least one more off the new record, and then maybe we'll play an old song or two for it as well. Thanks for coming out. It's appreciated. Nice to see all these folks here.
any requests out there? Let's do Green Isles. Good idea.
somebody yell this one, so we'll do this one too. I think that's probably going to be our last one, but we're going to sign records and stuff, and thanks so much for coming and hanging
Thank you
out.
guys.
Yeah, we're
Thanks to Mike.
Thank you, Mike and Relix, for a really thoughtful Q&A.
You guys really nice.
We're proud of the new record, so if you don't have it yet, I'm pretty sure they have it here. You know? So you're gonna get it.
I got a couple over there.
Sold out, sorry. One, two. Thanks so much. Thanks, everybody.